Yeah, my name's Eddie Tanner. This is Deep Seated Farm. So I planted this hedgerow at the western edge of my farm. It's about 600 feet of hedgerow that's focused on native plants. It contains about 10 species of natives. There's wax myrtle, silk tassel, ceanothus, red flowering currant, ninebark, some other ones I'm forgetting at the moment. And we planted it about 15 years ago, so it's had plenty of time to kind of grow and grow wild. When I got onto this piece of farmland, when I signed the lease and started farming here, it was just a field of grass with not a lot of diversity, mostly, non-native European perennial grasses, not even a lot of really happy forbs growing in there. And it was, kind of devoid of diversity. But I figured, just if I could devote just a small portion of that land to providing some habitat for all the other species aside from just growing food for humans, I felt like it was an important thing to do.
Yeah, awesome.
The nice thing about hedgerows is that they can serve multiple functions on the farm. I knew with my site a few things that I wanted. I wanted to provide habitat, of course, but I also needed a windbreak. We get cold northwest winds in the spring, so being able to place the hedgerow at the west side of my farm, it doubles as a windbreak. I also use organic methods and have a conventional neighbor, so you need a buffer zone anyway. So planting this hedgerow in the buffer zone just kind of stacked functions for me. And I knew really the biggest challenge for me was just having time or energy or resources to deal with weeds. So the decision I made for my hedgerow was to plant all the plants through a black landscape fabric. And that really suppressed the weeds for those first couple years without me having to do much other than, pull from the holes right around the plant. And I also put in drip irrigation to make sure they thrive those first couple summers. Yeah, it was a little hard to decide what species to plant in the hedgerow, especially because I hadn't really seen a lot of them growing in a landscape kind of farm setting. But I did select plants that I had seen growing just in wild places near the farm. Um, and, over time, some have thrived more than others and have kind of taken over. And so even though not everything I planted is still there, the hedgerow is like fully filled in and thick. Yeah, I mean, a hedgerow like this does require some maintenance. So over the years, as it's grown, Himalaya berries have grown in there, and we have to, periodically come in and root them out. And there's always some amount of chainsaw and hedge trimmer work each season. That's usually a little bit of winter work, because otherwise it would just take over a larger and larger footprint. Part of ours is growing pretty close to one of our tunnels, so it has tried to kind of grow into the tunnels, and we got to rein it back in. So there are maintenance costs associated with having a hedgerow, but nothing overwhelming. And I think the other challenge we've found is that one of the main goals of this is to create habitat for wildlife. I love birds. I love supporting birds, but some of those birds can be pests. So we have a ton of white-crowned sparrows that love this hedgerow, but they also feed on seedlings, newly seeded plants, newly transplanted lettuce, direct seeded spinach. Those are some of their favorites. And so we've learned that we have to, if we're planting those crops near our hedgerow, we need to row cover them. So yeah, we want to support wildlife, and and that's not to say too, you have to recognize too that those birds are also eating caterpillars and providing a pest control function for us. So there's the good and the bad.
Sure. Nice.
So I got lucky because we don't have deer in this part of Arcata, so I didn't have to fence the young plants. If it was a farm that already had deer fencing and it was going inside the fencing, that would be one solution. But I know a lot of people, that is an important step, is putting some kind of fencing around the young plants to, prevent browsing, at least for those first couple of years.
Yeah.
Well, honestly, it's hard to quantify the benefits. As far as how much of a pest control service they're providing. But we knew, some of the benefits are more obvious. We do know that it is functioning as a windbreak. That is a noticeable benefit to us. And we do definitely notice utilization. We see birds in the hedgerow, we see insects buzzing around the flowers. So a lot of the beneficials that we're trying to attract. So we know they're using these hedgerow and pollinator plants that we plant. So even though it's hard to quantify that benefit, pretty confident that it's happening.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'd say go for it, especially now that there's money to support these projects. It really only takes a small percentage of your land base to create this habitat and have this kind of ecological impact on your farm. And I think there are all these opportunities, like I was mentioning, to stack functions and get added value from these plantings, whether that's a windbreak or whether that's, attracting natural enemies. We do insectary plantings interspersed with some of our annual crops to promote natural enemies, to provide pollen and nectar to insects that will feed on pest insects that we have out here on the farm. For that, we mostly use a seed mix of Phacelia, alyssum, and coriander. The Phacelia is really attractive to bumblebees. The alyssum in the mix is a favorite of syrphid flies or hoverflies that eat aphids. And the cilantro or coriander, when it blooms, is really attractive to trichogramma wasps, the wasps that are parasitoids of caterpillars. I think a lot of us farmers, part of what we enjoy about the work is how much time we get to spend outside, how a part of our environment we are. And all the farmers I know have their eyes open and are looking at what's happening around them in the landscape. And having this hedgerow, it's kind of been a focal point for that. For me, it's birds. I love birds, and I maintain a list of all the birds that I've seen. And having this hedgerow has definitely attracted more, and that's been fun for me.
Great.